You know, when Canadians see politicians betray the values and policies that they claim to believe in, I think it damages our democracy and it breeds cynicism in our politics. I'll leave it to Ms. Begum to explain to the people of Scarborough Southwest why she's abandoning the progressive policies she claimed to believe in to run for a party that is clearly governing like a Conservative party.
That's the interim leader of the federal NDP, Don Davies, weighing in on some political news today. The federal Liberals have poached the deputy leader of the Ontario NDP to run for them in a by-election whenever it happens in Bill Blair's old riding. There's lots of potential by-elections on the horizon, plus, of course, the unveiling of former Prime Minister Stephen Harper's portrait here in Ottawa. So we've got a special edition of our front bench to talk about both those subjects. With us tonight, former senior advisor to Liberal Ontario governments of Dalton McGuinty and Kathleen Wynne. Dan Moulton is here. He's now a partner with Crestview Strategy. Next to him, Shakir Chambers worked in Prime Minister Stephen Harper's office before becoming a policy advisor to the International Trade Minister. George Soul here in studio with me was the former Director of Communications for the federal NDP. And Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Plus, we've got Bob Fife here, of course, the Ottawa, the bureau chief for the Parliamentary Bureau of the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Very nice to see you. George, I'll start with you on this subject before we get to former Prime Minister Harper. Is it a betrayal? Like, how are the Liberals snagging in both Danielle Martin and this candidate, like a more progressively minded candidate, when, you know, the federal NDP leader is framing them as not a progressive party anymore?
Well, I think that's a good question, and that's something they're going to have to answer to the voters for. I think, you know, whenever someone in the family leaves the party, I think it's hard and it hurts us individually. I often think of the staff. It happened to me after Jack died. We lost someone who I had helped actually get elected back at home when he crossed over and decided to run for the provincial Liberals as well, actually. And, you know, to be honest, I still haven't really forgiven him. So these things can hurt personally. I think it's up to the politician to then be able to answer for that in the election, try to square the circle of coming from a progressive, strong official opposition with Marit Stiles in Ontario to now running for a Conservative party wearing a Liberal jersey federally. I think that's an answer for her to have to answer for sure.
Dan, what do you think the strategy is here on the Liberals' part?
Let me start by saying I think it's an enormous achievement on the part of the Prime Minister and his political team, led by Braden Cayley and many others on that team that have been, I think, executing on a strategy which is to demonstrate to Canadians they're bringing in all sides of the political spectrum to a mission in a time of great challenge for our country. And we've seen Conservatives crossing the floor through the fall. I don't think as many people were expecting to see a New Democrat step forward for this role, move from a provincial office to join the federal party at this point in the cycle. But I think it's a demonstration that this party has a lot more political chops than people are giving it credit for, right? I think over the course of the last 12 months, there's been questions raised about the Prime Minister's political chops and whether or not he is a politician in the most traditional sense. I think he'll be the first to say sometimes he isn't. I think moves like this, moves like having Conservatives crossing the floor and the way that they've executed the timing on some of these things are a clear demonstration. This is a political force to be reckoned with.
I think it's a very fair point, Laura, and like the point especially about how before Christmas it was Conservatives moving over, now it's a provincial NDP. You obviously cover Queen's Park. What is the take there? How damaging is this to the provincial NDP?
It was a big surprise, I think, for those who cover Queen's Park. I don't think anyone saw this coming, this particular MPP, especially because she is the deputy leader, known as quite progressive, and you know, the Ontario NDP is a quite progressive party, and so to move over to the federal Liberals, I think, to Dan's point, it does kind of speak to the breadth of the appeal. And I haven't talked to Doly Begum personally about her decision to do that. I mean, obviously she's moving from a party in opposition to government. If she is indeed elected, she would be in government. She might have more interest on national or federal issues. She might be more interested in that. But it kind of landed like a rock, quite frankly, and it did seem like Marit Stiles was taken aback by the news. She did thank her, but she openly said in her statement that she learned of this just this morning. And so I think it does spell trouble for the provincial NDP, and it does make the provincial race in Scarborough Southwest a really interesting one to watch, because it now kind of seems like it's a three-way race potentially between the Liberals, NDP, and Conservatives. And then, of course, you have the added mix of Nate Erskine-Smith now hoping to run for the Liberals there. So it's going to be quite a big one to watch in Ontario politics.
Bob, Dan referenced kind of the moment we're in and how it's at times making strange bedfellows. And maybe that's none more evidence than the past 2 days here in Ottawa, where former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, his portrait was unveiled tonight. Lots of people from different political parties, including the current Prime Minister, on stage with him and in the room. Yesterday, a fireside chat alongside former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien. I know, if I recall the last few years of the Harper government, you were #1 reporter in their favor. I'm kidding, because you were like a dog with a bone with so many things. What did you think of the remarks today by both Prime Ministers and what it says about this moment?
Okay, well, there are two things. When people leave office, there is a great deal of respect, as there should be, for former Prime Ministers. And I thought the moment with former Prime Minister Chrétien and Harper yesterday was just one of those classic Canadian moments where they were able to talk about the importance of the country, the unity and the threats from Donald Trump, and we saw that very powerful statement from Mr. Harper in his statement today, and as he wrapped up the unveiling of his portrait, about how important it is for all parties in this times of Donald Trump breathing down our necks to work together on issues of national unity. But I cannot resist commenting on what I've heard here before with these other people. This is liberal cynicism at its worst. Look, this Miss Begum has no principles whatsoever. She was a New Democrat, a deputy leader. She sold her soul to the Liberals. And the Liberals, they don't even believe in democracy anymore. What about grassroots democracy? What about nomination meetings where you go and you fight for a nomination? No, these two, the one in Christopher Freeland's and in this one, have been picked by the party to run as nomination. So there's no grassroots. There's no feeling within the party that you can go and vote for somebody because, you know what, Liberals might not vote for Miss Begum because they see her as what she is. She was a former New Democratic NDP leader, deputy leader. So
does it matter? Like, political parties will push back and say, like, obviously we're trying to win.
Well, of course they want to win.
All sorts of parties appoint candidates.
But I don't. At the same time, you have to call it for what it is.
Of course, that's why we have Bob Fife in the world. Yeah.
I get the sense here, the way things are being played out in this landscape, that we may be going into an election campaign.
Yeah, it doesn't feel impossible at this moment. Yeah. George, you want to jump in, then I'll get Shakir.
Well, yeah, just really quickly to say, that's the other part of this, right? I mean, I would be shocked if we don't see Miss Begum in some kind of senior role if she does get elected. So I think there's more dealings going on here than just, hey, do you want to be an MP? I think there's more being offered to her, which again adds to that cynicism that Bob's talking about. And I think on top of that, having on the same day, Nate Erskine-Smith announced that he's going to run in that seat. Like, this was a heavily coordinated,
organized, yeah.
It was a heavily coordinated plan to kind of try to get around any kind of as Bob says, grassroots elections.
Seat.
Well, he's going to sit as an MP during the election.
I want to give the floor to Shakir. Shakir, your thoughts on that, and then maybe also because you worked in the Harper government, your reflections on what's occurring here.
I think just for Harper, I mean, to Bob's point, when you're in government, folks don't really like you. When you're out of government, people kind of praise you. So good for Harper. Obviously, a guy who's had conviction, was principled, really focused on detail and, not just making an announcement, but execution, implementing what he announced and making it, kind of the end goal of the policy there. So great for Harper. I think the one thing I would say about him, Chrétien, talking about national unity, I think it's good to see elder statesmen like that talking about, bringing the country together, parties working together. But, from what I've seen, if you look at Quebec and the PQ, I don't think they're hearing that message. And from what I saw with your interview on Sunday, Vashi, with, Jeffrey Rath, there's no way he's saying, that Harper guy has some good points and we should stop all this separatist movement. So good to hear them say that, but I think the effectiveness of this national unity piece, I get it all. But I think, it's more for the folks like Pierre on the federal level. It makes sense to cooperate on the Canada-U.S. stuff. I don't think the party does well on the Canada-U.S. Trump pieces, but also you got to hold the government to the account. You are the official opposition. You can't do what the NDP did last session and just kind of go along to get along. You see what the punishment is if you do that in the election.
Dan, I've got 30 seconds to respond to the end of democracy if you'd like to take it.
Well, maybe I'll pick up on something that Bob laid out there at the end, which was whether or not we're about to have an election. I am skeptical that the Prime Minister is likely to call an election anytime soon. I think he would much rather govern. But I'll say, perhaps as a cynical liberal, as Bob puts it, I think the Prime Minister should call an election. I think if you look at the polling, it's very clear that he would secure a majority mandate and he should go to the polls and seek a mandate to deal with our trading relationship as we head into the Cushing renegotiation.
Bob, you think there's going to be an election?
Well, yes, I do think we're going to into an election campaign for the reasons he's outlined. The Liberals are very good at winning because they take the opportunity. When they see the opportunity, they seize it.
Okay, I'm going to leave on that note. Seize my opportunity for a commercial break. Thanks, everyone. Our front bench, Bob Fife, George Soul, Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, and Laura Stone.